Matthew, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today and really excited to hear your journey today. I think there's a lot we can draw out from it, especially when it comes to something like schizophrenia. I think there's so much lack of information out there and there's so much fear around it and stigma. And my hope is today we can, through hearing your journey, uncover some of that stigma and see how it can even provide some hope and guidance to people. Really looking forward to hearing everything you've gone through. But before we jump into it, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for having me on here. I'm from Canada, Eastern Canada. I grew up there in the 70s and 80s in a small seaside resort town. And then I went off to university, and that's when some symptoms of schizophrenia were starting to happen in me. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't really know much about mental illness at all. I knew about mental health, I knew about psychology. I'd heard those words before, but I didn't know about depression, anxiety, bipolar. I'd heard the
Mhm.
word schizophrenia in a movie before about split personality, which isn't accurate. It's split and multiple personality does exist, but it's not with schizophrenia. Yeah, so I had these symptoms creep up, but they were fairly mild, and so that's I can get into that later.
Sure.
But yeah, um,
Absolutely. Thank you
yeah.
for that. And so when you went to university, had you moved away from home? Were you in another city, another town going to university?
Yeah, I had moved to a different town. I moved from a small town in New Brunswick to Wolfville, Nova Scotia, to go to Acadia University there. Yeah, it was a different environment. I did have some friends there who I grew up with who went to the same university, but I just was more depressed and my energy was low. I went to get it checked out, and the university health clinic
Mhm.
said, yeah, they sent me for blood work. It came back fine. And they sent me out the door saying, focus on the future. So that was their advice to me, which I didn't really know how to do, but I guess. Anyway, so that's how I spent the rest of university. But at the end of university, after 5 years, I was taking engineering. The disease all of a sudden hit very hard. And I started to have I had a suicidal thought one day, and I thought that isn't good. I should get that checked out. So I went and ended up in the hospital and the psych ward, and that was my introduction into the mental health system. So yeah, that was back in 1994. I got on a medication. It worked glacially slowly, but it worked. I noticed an improvement in my mental health every single week. And after 27 years, one day my symptoms just stopped in 2021. So I'm still on a medication. I'm not cured. The stat is about 30% of people have remission of their symptoms. And that's a rough figure. It depends on some variables. And early intervention is a factor in that. And trying to look after yourself too, doing self-care. And I did those things. So I was never guaranteed recovery. I was never guaranteed to have my symptoms go away. But yeah, I'm thankful that they have. But at the same time, I want to tell people who do have schizophrenia and maybe aren't where they want to be mentally, you can still lead meaningful lives and have purpose. The pain for me in the beginning was very intense. And it's hard to imagine a different kind of pain when you're in that pain already. But with treatment, the pain can come down to more manageable levels that will allow you to carry on for much longer than you think. And that's true for me. I carried on for way longer than I thought I ever could, especially when the pain was at its worst. But one thing I want to tell people, so many people with schizophrenia are not violent. So many. The average rate of violence in the general population is about 2%. And that depends on how you define violence. There's different aspects of it. But people with treated schizophrenia are the same, about 2%. So there's about 1% of the population has schizophrenia. So that's about 80 million people worldwide. 98% of those 89 people. So the BC Schizophrenia Society says that people with untreated schizophrenia, their rates of violence are a bit higher. I'm trying to find out what that number is. But
Mhm.
overall, a huge majority of people with schizophrenia are not monsters. There
Mhm.
is a lady in the States, Cecilia McGow. She has a TED Talk called I Am Not a Monster. She has schizophrenia, and It's true. I'm just wanting to tell people that Cecilia's nonprofit she started, Students with Psychosis. It includes people with schizophrenia. During COVID, they started posting Zoom group shots of their student advocates with psychosis and schizophrenia from around the world. So back in that year, 2020, I saw for the first time in my life all these photos of people who had the exact same thing as me. And they were all younger, like university students, but I saw dozens and dozens of photos. And in my life, up until then, and even till now, I haven't met a ton of people with schizophrenia. I've met a small number of them over the years, but we tend to hide. And I've done more virtual speaking than I have in person speaking as I've done my advocacy work since 2018. So so they started posting all these photos of them, and they started posting bios, like a photo of somebody. Hi, I'm from Argentina. I'm studying astronomy, and they had all these wide varieties of interests of things they're studying. And we all have different personalities. We all have different dreams and goals. We're human. We're not monsters. And I really want to tell people that there's millions upon millions of us. We're all around in your community. We're all around you. We've got you surrounded. It's 1% of the population. That's 1 out of 100 people. And I think I shouldn't say the psychosis stat because I don't know it. I think it's roughly around 2% of the population for psychosis. So, yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of us. So,
for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
and I appreciate that. You're talking about the pain aspect of it. Are you able to elaborate what do you mean when you talk about pain and overcoming that, especially when you're dealing with schizophrenia, whether or not you've been diagnosed? Obviously, the diagnosis helps because then it gives you an understanding of what you're dealing with. But for many people, they can go undiagnosed. And obviously, there's consequences and risks associated with that. But yeah, coming back to the pain piece, what are you referring to?
I would have to say a lot of it is the emotions.
Yeah.
It's just severe emotions. Everybody knows what the blues are. Everyone gets a little bit down sometimes. Everybody knows what butterflies in your stomach feels like. We get that sometimes. It's a combination. There's a bunch of symptoms with schizophrenia. There's a lot of different ways that I would describe how it was for me. Overall, though, I'd have to choose. It's the emotions. They're just so severe. It's like the blues times 1,000 or 1,000,000 kind of thing, or butterflies in your stomach times it. For the butterflies in your stomach, I remember because I had depression and anxiety at the same time, and it was hard for me to differentiate all these different things going on in my mind, in my mind and body at the same time. It's just, this is the way I feel. And a big one was I felt like I had a big knife through my chest, like a machete or something. It just felt like something was in my chest. And I'm like, Doc, can you pull it out? Pull it out now. Just get this knife out of my chest now.
Yeah.
And I've heard other people say that it feels like a knife in their chest. It's just, and the pain is severe, but I wouldn't say it's the most severe pain a person can have on the planet. I've never been in a horrific accident. I've never given birth. I don't know what that's, but schizophrenia is a combination of severe pain to whatever degree over a long period of time. I remember thinking if this lasted 2 months or 2 weeks, I could go through this. But when you start talking about years, that was hard for me. And the things that I know now, I've read so many books on how to get myself better mentally. I've read books by Navy Mark Devine. Unbeatable Mind is his book. He's a Navy SEAL. He creates and trains Navy SEALs, thousands of them. And in their training, Navy SEALs are taught that you're capable of 20 times more than you think you are. And I feel like I was tested that way. It's just pushed and pushed. And so many times I'd be sitting there thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know what I can do. I don't know
Mhm.
how this is going to work out. I don't know what I'm going to do here.
Mhm.
And I encourage people to just sit with that pain. It's very uncomfortable, I know, but things just keep working out. It's well documented now that people who attempt suicide and survive, the survivors, many of them say they instantly regretted it. Kevin Hines, he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. He instantly regretted it. Kevin Briggs is a patrolman for the Golden Gate Bridge. He says in his TED Talk, many people instantly regret it. So think about that. You're sitting there thinking, I can't do this anymore. And in a second, you're thinking, I want to live. Why did I do this? I want to see my friends, my family. There's things I want to do with my life. In an instant, your brain chemistry changes. Like there's studies done with people who are sitting on the couch and have no energy. And someone comes up to them in the study and says, would you like to go for a run or do
Hmm.
some push-ups, go for a workout, that kind of thing? They say, no, I'm just beat. Sorry, I can't do it. And then they say, what if we gave you $100? Would you go for a 5K run? And all of a sudden, all these people find this energy out of nowhere and they get up and do that. So what I do, this has helped me a number of times, is I say, if I don't want to do something, I ask myself, would I do this for $100? And if I say no, not $100, this is tough, I just up it to 100, to 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. I just keep upping it. One day I got out of bed for something like 10 or $100 million, but it works beautifully. And it literally, when I think, okay, 10 million, no, I wouldn't do it for 10 million, 100 million. You know what? I'd do it for 100 million. And like in a second, literally 1 second, my body is moving. I'm getting out of bed, making actions towards what I want to do. It's incredible. That trick
Hmm.
works so well for me. So the brain has, they said in the study, the brain has a sort of protective mechanism that's, I would argue, not that efficient or not that well working, because it makes us dopey and thinks we can't do anything when really we can. Yeah, I
Yeah.
encourage people to just sit with that pain. And there's so many things that just can happen. You can get a phone call from somebody, someone can help. Kevin Hines says
Hmm.
when he still has suicidal thoughts to this day, and he says he knows he will never take his life because he knows he can always just keep going. And his trick is when he's having a hard time, he says to someone nearby or he phones somebody, he says, I need help now.
Hmm.
And just to get attention. And I know it's hard for people with mental illness to sometimes ask for help. Our self-esteem is low, but that's what he does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And the other thing you talked about were the symptoms. And based on the research I've come across, for men, the onset of schizophrenia is relatively early. So it's like late adolescence, early adulthood. For women, it tends to be a bit later, mid 30s type of thing. So timing wise, that's when you started experiencing the symptoms. You said you started experiencing it early in university, but then you managed to complete your undergrad. And then that's when you finally had the suicidal ideation and then subsequent to that, you were diagnosed. So let's first talk about your journey through university. So you're noticing these symptoms. What were they like? And how did you manage to continue your education? And then we can get into a detailed kind of understanding of what your symptoms were.
Yeah, so the first year I was low on energy. I went to see the doctor about it. They sent me out the door, essentially. Nice guy, but my second year I started to have blunted emotions. They weren't as, yeah, just blunted. My third year, sorry, I started seeing things as in 2 dimensions, not three, and that sounds freaky. I mean, it's not as freaky as you think, but for me, it was unsettling for sure. I just felt disconnected from things. I felt like I was watching my life as if I was watching it on TV. I couldn't really interact with it as much. I could. If you threw me a ball, I would catch it. I could talk to people. I went to school. I was getting mostly A's through all of this, through all of university. So these symptoms were relatively mild compared to what was going to come down the tubes, but they were still unsettling. And I talked to some friends about it, but back in the early 90s, no one was talking about mental illness. No, if I had those symptoms today, someone would say, Matthew, have they lasted longer for 2 weeks? Why don't you go see somebody about that? Nobody ever said that back then. I didn't even, I'd already just gone to the doctor and he said I was fine a year or two early, 2 years earlier. Yeah, so that was my third year. Fourth year and fifth year, I can't remember as much, but yeah, they were still mild. And one of the symptoms with schizophrenia is disorganized thinking and hallucinations. I am in the 25% of people with schizophrenia who don't hallucinate. So I was lucky that way. People say they're very tormenting, although some people actually, their hallucinations are quite pleasurable. They see nice things in the sky, that kind of thing. And hallucinations can be any of the five senses. I'm lucky I didn't have to go through that. I never had some problems with substance abuse. I never smoked or drank or did drugs or anything. So I'm thankful for that too. And yeah, I paid my way through university. I did summer jobs. I never had to get a student loan. So I was okay financially. And I had a lot of things going for me. The only thing that was going wrong was just this disease coming into me. And yeah. I didn't finish my degree. I had to fail out of my last term of my last year. And that's when I went into the hospital. So that's a big blow. I'd bicycled across Canada in the middle of university after my third year. I was still able to do things like that. I was on the university rowing team for a year or two, and I did a triathlon. And yeah, but I felt one of the symptoms in my third year was I would just say and do things that didn't sound like me. I'd say something like that just doesn't sound like something I'd say. And it felt like I had a brain transplant. It felt like someone had come into my head, had taken my mind out of my body and put somebody else's in. It felt like I was thinking their thoughts and they were making me do things that I didn't want to do. Still to a mild degree, but that's what it felt like.
So when it comes to the symptoms, I think part of the challenge is it's hard to diagnose because there's comorbidities, right, with other disorders. So I think that's part of the challenge with schizophrenia. But then when based on the research, when you look at the symptoms, there's positive symptoms, so behaviors that shouldn't be there but are present, negative symptoms, and then cognitive symptoms. So the cognitive symptoms that you're referring to, the disordered thinking, the hallucinations, the delusions. Now, when you're talking about violence, do you think part of the violence often comes from the hallucinations and delusions? Because a lot of the times, what I've read is people are hallucinating that someone's after them. So often it's like the government's after me and stuff like that. So could that induce some of the violence in the small percentage, the 2% that you were talking about?
Probably. I'm
Yeah.
not an expert on that, and I've never had hallucinations myself. But that's definitely something that I would imagine is, yeah,
Yeah.
they can be. I was talking to a friend who didn't have any mental illness, but he was in the hospital for surgery, and he said that the painkillers he was on made him hallucinate. And he said it was so real. He said there were like shiny metallic bugs flying out of the room, coming straight at him. And his mom had to sit with him all night. He was like, "Get them off me, get them off me." And she had to pick these imaginary bugs off him all night. And he knew it couldn't be real, but he said it just felt so real. It was terrifying. That's how it's when the disease hit me hard, that's when the symptoms really got intense. And it's like when you wake up in the middle of the night from a nightmare, you're still for so many seconds, minutes, whatever, your body is still in that nightmare. You're still scared. Things are creepy and you're like, I don't want to go back into that. It's like that, but more intense every day. It's a living nightmare. It's that creepy feeling. Or if you're scared of the dark, I know for me, with schizophrenia, that the nighttime was very scary for me. Like walking around outside, it just seemed very creepy, like more so than it was for the daytime for me. Daytime was creepy too.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's. I think it was Nikki Sixx, the drummer from Motley Crue. He said for all of his life, I think, or at least a good chunk of it, he for so many minutes in the morning when he wakes up, he has this feeling of dread, and then it goes away. He's fine, but he said he's had that his whole life, just feeling that something really bad is going to happen. And that's what it was like for me. I was never classified as paranoid. I never thought the government was spying on me through my phone and that kind of thing. But yeah, yeah. And another thing is that whenever I do talk about schizophrenia, I end up talking about violence because it's people, there's just so much unknown about it still today in 2025. And that's why I do try to tell people that there are people who aren't violent. And I think there definitely needs to be a conversation about the violence because someone could get hurt. And we need to talk about that for sure. I think there should be more talk on the millions of people who have never laid a finger on anybody and they go about their day not harming anybody. And it's so yeah, that could be a conversation for another time, but if we don't have time today, but yeah, and even I have to remind myself too that sometimes that all these people, they're just living their lives, going about normal as anything. They're not feeling good because of
Mm.
schizophrenia, or maybe they've recovered
Yeah.
and they're feeling fine. So yeah.
Yeah. And in some cases, it could be related to genetic factors. Was that ruled out in your case or did that play a role?
there's a genetic component. There's so much. I'm overwhelmed by all the studies and research into the brain and schizophrenia. It's hard for me to keep up with. And a lot of them are scientific journals, which I find hard to read. I'm smart, but I just find them hard to decipher. I like a quick summary of it if I can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even sometimes those are a bit difficult to read the summaries. So there is a genetic component. It is known to sometimes skip generations. Grandfather can get it, then a grandchild can have it. So I think it's the same in both men and women, 50-50 split. And it's the same globally. The 1%, it's the same all around the world in every country, about 1%.
Yeah. Yeah. And in your case, you said obviously the medication helped and you're still on medication, but there's another aspect of, and I don't know how much you looked into this for yourself, but the role of dopamine and limiting that. And I think that's where drugs of abuse can affect people with schizophrenia. But were you able to factor in the role of some of the neurotransmitters that can affect schizophrenia, whether it's dopamine or glutamate, but they both tend to have a factor?
Yeah, I saw a show on adrenaline junkies and they talked about dopamine. Adrenaline junkies have higher levels of dopamine. They can handle a lot more things going on at the same time. Fighter jet pilots, they have a video game to test to see if they can actually be a pilot. And the video game just gradually introduces more and more onto the screen. Everybody has a breaking point. They say, I can't do it anymore. Too much going on. And if you make the threshold, then you can be a jet fighter pilot. The guy in the show talking about this, he went down the luge and he was talking with a microphone underneath his helmet. And eventually, as they got faster and faster, he couldn't talk anymore. You just heard him. He was just so scared. And that's what it felt like for me. Just so many things going on. I could be in a room with nothing in it. I just felt like I was going at light speed, just bombarded by stimuli. And it's like just whatever happens to your brain when, like that guy going down the luge, whatever chemicals go through your brain when that happens. My brain just said, you know what? Your brain's capable of doing this. Let's just do it anyway. It's like that feeling of just too much going on. The drug I was on had a dopamine factor. I'm not the best on neurochemistry and stuff, so I probably can't talk about that a whole lot. The only official certification I have is an engineering degree. I've read a lot of books on how to get myself better, but I'd say I read more books on how to think better, just things to think about, thought patterns. It says I disconnected here. Oh, wait, can you hear me okay? Oh, it says reconnected. Can you hear me
Yeah.
okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue. You were talking about the drugs you
Okay.
were on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've read more books on, what was the last thing I said when you,
You were about to get into the drugs you were on.
okay. Yeah. I don't really, the drugs I was on, there's definitely the one drug I was on and it's still on today. It has a dopamine factor to it, but I don't know much about neurochemistry. I've read more books on just how to think better, thought patterns, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
That's where I've found more success. There's a book by Dr. Daniel Amen called Memory Rescue, and it's about dementia. And in the book, he's got all sorts of different kinds of supplements and other things you can take to help with memory. I don't know if there's a book written like that for schizophrenia. All these different things you could take to help with schizophrenia. I took my medication. I know Dr. Daniel Amen recommends a multivitamin and fish oil and vitamin D for overall general mental health. So I take those. A multivitamin, not as commonly. I don't take that as much, but fish oil and vitamin D I take. And in Memory Rescue, he says some of the healthiest brain scans he sees are of people who've taken ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo has a blood thinning component to it, so read the label, but I do take that. So that's, yeah, yeah.
No, that's fair. So one of the things you and I had chatted about previously was the importance of sharing your story and the message. Why is it important for you to talk about this, especially now that you feel like the symptoms have subsided? And I know we touched on the importance of go addressing the stigma that comes with schizophrenia, but I am curious to hear your reasoning and your motivation behind sharing your story.
Yeah, I can't unshare it. I can't sit here having gone through that pain and have all these. I've got like 30 years of tricks and techniques and books I've read and articles and resources. I've got them listed on my website if you want a quick way into my brain for tips and things to do for schizophrenia and overall mental health. But I can't sit here and not share it. I just can't. I'm always talking about it with people. I'm always trying to throw it out, tips to other people. And it makes me feel good to be able to share it on podcasts like yours. Thank you. I just can't not. I can't sit here knowing so many millions of people are going through that pain, and maybe I could help some of them. Yeah. I went through in my worst year. I went through in 1994. A lady saw me walking down the street, and she said I looked like I was walking through a world of flying glass. I'm like,
Mm,
that's exactly how I feel. Thanks for noticing. And my heart went out to people in impoverished countries, war-torn countries, who have all those things to go through, and mental illness as well, often untreated mental illness. And so, anyway, a TED Talk burbled up into my feed in 2017 or so about mental health in developing countries. And I don't know why I never went looking for that online, but there are tons of resources online about that. It is still a vastly under-resourced cause, but I made a website, mindaid.ca, and it's the world's first of its kind. It's got all the groups helping the cause on one site. I found that the groups helping the cause are scattered across the web. And I just said, at its essence, my website's a simple curation site. It's just got them all the resources on one site. And I keep finding more resources as time goes on. But it could be why I'm helping people, because I read all these books for so many years on how to be happier in general, and they often say helping other people. Martin Seligman, he's got a TED Talk, The
mhm,
New Era of Positive Psychology, and he says that the best indicator, he says it's well proven, the best indicator of long-term life satisfaction is helping other people, philanthropy, giving back, being of something service to something larger than yourself could be a reason, but I'm talking about it all the time. If I'm in a conversation with somebody, it won't be long if I can work it into a general conversation about mental health and what I've been through.
mhm,
So it's in me for some reason.
mhm.
I know some people
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it, and I respect that, but
Mm,
yeah, I do. I have this. It's in me, and I can't help it.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. And what can the general public do to learn more? Because again, coming back to the stigma piece, and I think a lot of the times, if someone is dealing with schizophrenia, the individual can get ostracized, right, in society. And so, what can we do as the general public, not only to educate ourselves more, but support people? I know for you, you said symptoms weren't as severe, but what about people that have severe symptoms and are really seeking help or are struggling to get help? What can the general population do?
Empathy. We need to have a lot more empathy. I saw a prison guard for some mass murderer on a TV show, and she says you have to have a lot of empathy to work with mass murderers. I worked with a lady whose daughter, her job was to escort criminals from the jail to the courtroom, and she said she was asked sometimes to escort certain criminals because she had a very calming influence on them. And I've got an article that people can get from me about my best listening tips. There's so many different ways you can improve your listening skills, and also how to improve your ability to get people to open up to you in the first place. What kind of vibes are you giving off? What's your body language? What are your thoughts about them? What are your beliefs? It's just a lot of empathy towards people. That's for the people. And again, we see people not doing well and they get more of the attention. But there are lots of other people who aren't violent and they need attention too. They make up the vast majority of people with schizophrenia. We all need attention. And in North America, loneliness is a huge factor. It was almost and still is taboo to talk about loneliness. Don't tell anybody you're lonely. We all have to be this shiny, happy person. Social media is full of people who are shiny and happy. I'm one of them. I'm on social media, and we just have this tendency to portray the good side of ourselves, and I'm guilty of that as well. I'm trying to show more of my flaws. That's what Tim Ferriss talks about in his book Tools of Titans. He says He's done lots of things, but he's also at the same time, like in a 3-month period or so in the book, he gives examples of I lay in bed curled up in the fetal position. The next day I was doing a podcast. All these things, we all have these tendencies, but helping other people, spending time, having empathy, spending time with them, not ignoring them, giving them a call. I found about an hour call once a week was very beneficial for me. Just ask me questions, be interested in my life. More importantly, even make me laugh. Tell me a joke, go for a walk with me, go for a hike. There's lots of things we can do. And I know in our society, we're just conditioned to be so isolated. And a lot of the times it's systems that are set up. In our offices, we have all these walls. We drive around in cars that have walls around them. We can't interact with the people on the street as while they're in their cars. We go home and a lot of us are living by ourselves. We don't live as much together. A lot of these are just systems. So if you have mental illness and schizophrenia, I'm trying to remind you here that it's not maybe you're lonely tonight because you're thinking, I don't have any friends. It must be me. It must be me. I must be shunning everybody. Am I doing something wrong? Why am I alone here tonight? I'll try to remind you that often it's just the systems that are set up to make so many of us lonely. I think there's stats of 30 or 40% of Americans are lonely, have no one to talk to about the things they want to do. 30% of Americans are single. It's a lot of us are just isolated by systems. So it's not your fault. A lot of the time it's just not your fault. And I have to remind myself of that too. I still struggle with being alone too much. And it's just the way our systems are designed. If you lived in a more communal culture, if things were set up more, communal buildings, walking amongst people more. That's why I tried to go to events. That was something that helped me just get out of the house. There's a YouTuber in New Brunswick, and his slogan is an adventurer YouTuber, and his slogan is things happen when you leave the house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? That is true. Going for a walk around the block helps. Going to events helps. Going to the coffee shop helps. Just getting out. And yes, you may think, oh, I'm just going to the coffee shop. It's another blah day. But all of it helps. And I encourage people who are suffering to do some things that you really would like to do, like bucket list things. Do them anyway. Even if, because I lived in New Brunswick all my life, and the Maritimes all my life. And I've been out to the west coast of British Columbia a number of times. I did that while I was sick. A number of times I came out, and it was difficult, but I did it anyway. I felt I had enough health at the time to come out and do that. And yes, I was out here. I'm out here now on Vancouver Island, and I'd be out here and I'd be thinking, oh, I wish I could feel better while I was out here. It's like going to Disney while you're getting chemo treatment kind of thing. But I encourage people to do it anyway, because somewhere in the deep recesses of your brain, behind your main thinking, it counts, it helps, it registers. And months or years later, you can say, you know what? I did that anyway. Despite all that, I did that anyway. Even though I didn't feel good, I did that anyway. And that could be anything, whether it's travel or anything that you like to do with your life. I encourage you to do it. And all these things help. There's so many things that we can do to improve our mental health. And if I would do something, I'd go for a walk. And I'm like, you know what? It didn't make me feel any better at all. But just the fact that I went out, somewhere in there it registers, even though I can't feel it. There's so many things we can do. And
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you is getting out of our comfort zone and really forcing ourselves to experience life. And I think it's easy, as you were sharing, when we're caught in that depressive cycle, to shut down and isolate. And we're basically making the problem worse, which can be tough to drag yourself out and expose yourself to these things. But that's where really, to your point, the system isn't helping, but we need to be aware of that too, that this isn't helping. So how do I go around it and create these opportunities for myself so I'm not falling into that spiral? But as people on the other side, to your point, we want to be empathetic, showing compassion, showing that willingness to connect with others, which has also become very challenging. So how can we play a role in supporting others as well on their journey? So I appreciate that, Matthew. And yeah, it makes sense. I think we all can do a little bit more.
yeah, as far as like spending time with people, there's a book called When We Walk By about homelessness. And the guy who wrote that, they have a nonprofit to help homelessness people who are unhoused. And one of the things they started was a phone buddy program. They matched somebody who's unhoused with someone else who's doing relatively okay. And they meet up or a phone call or something. It's a phone buddy program, but I think sometimes they meet up in real life for an hour a week. And that was the same for me. I found if someone gave me a call an hour a week, it gave me something to look forward to. It let me vent. I didn't have to vent every day. A lot of the times I just wanted to have fun sometimes. Let's go do something fun. I don't want to talk about my problems right now. But an hour a week was a really nice balance. And that's what that phone buddy program does. And that's something that people could start in their communities themselves. I'm assuming it's probably fairly simple to start a program up like that. And the people who were helping the people who were unhoused said, you know what? I got so much out of it. So much. They were helping me. We helped each other. They learned from each other. And in the book, When We Walk By, it says that many people who are unhoused, they don't even have friends with other unhoused people. They really isolate. And it takes us, people who are doing well, to break that sometimes. I felt like I was in a hospital in the operating room and there are no doctors there. Somebody, please come and operate on me. I need help. And it's hard to ask for help sometimes. Someone you grew up with, it's been years or decades since you talked to them, give them a call and don't underestimate how bad their life could be. You know, a phone call from you from once a week, you don't even have to leave your house. A half hour phone call once a month or something. It doesn't take long. Phone
Right.
calls are dirt cheap, press of a button, and just check up on people and keep checking out. It's nice to have regularity and consistency.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think in your journey also you shared self-care has been a huge factor. And I think that comes back to the whole point of creating opportunities for yourself too. That is truly self-care and that can go a long way.
Yeah, I found reading books was one of the biggest things to help me. I had access. I read books for free in the bookstore. I could go to the library. Books in the library are a little bit older, usually 1 or 2 years older at the most. Amazon is a billion books on there. I found myself going to the bookstore because it got me out of the house and there were people around, or I went to the library sometimes for sure, but just reading. I had
Mhm.
access to world-class information
Yeah.
for dirt cheap or free a lot of the time. And the
Yeah.
internet, there's so much for free. AI therapy, it's not official therapy, but a lot of people, millions of people worldwide are using AI now to give them a quick boost. I think the average is something like 15 times a day, like something like 30% of the population or 20% globally uses AI on average about 15 times a day for 6 minutes each time to give them a boost to their mood. And it doesn't necessarily replace therapy, it's maybe in addition to it. But I've tried it before. I said, boost my mood there, AI. And
Yeah.
it does a pretty good job of, I feel better about myself now. Thank you. So that could be the way the future is going. But the other thing is, a doctor said a reader's brain is a real thing. People who read a lot, I found reading, there's so much structure to reading, and you can sit there for hours reading, and it makes you think. And it's like somebody said, some podcaster said that if you're, because a lot of successful people read a lot, they want to learn and learn how to do better, or get a better mindset. And they say, if you're thinking there, I'm just by myself reading a book, maybe I could be doing something more exciting with my life. Think of someone, the author sitting right next to you, telling you the story, telling you
Yep.
what they want to hear, telling you what they want you to know.
Yep.
So that's a trick to use because believe me, I've spent many years feeling lonely sitting in the bookstore
Yeah.
reading
Yeah.
books just by myself. But I did it
For sure.
anyway. I couldn't pass
Yeah.
up that information.
Yeah. No, that's been my experience with reading. I think I was able to connect with myself and not get distracted in being engaged, just wanting to be out. I was able to find a lot of peace and I could immerse myself in the book and see from the author's lens and see the whole story, especially with biographies. I felt like I was, as you shared there, present and really hearing the story. And that was really something I enjoyed and I still enjoy. I still read a lot and I find it enjoyable to just immerse myself in the experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
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 Well, Matthew, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you sharing your story and helping us understand how we can support each other, especially when it comes to mental health, especially when it comes to schizophrenia. And It doesn't have to be this scary thing. We can definitely talk around the stigma and make it more real, but really support people that are struggling at times and might be feeling alone in their struggle. But for listeners that want to learn more about your work and how you're giving back, what are some ways they can do that?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to mention one more thing. A lot of people might be afraid of a conversation with someone going through an intense
Mhm.
experience like mental illness. For me, I had no problems talking about it. I want to talk about it. Like, don't be afraid. Don't feel awkward. Don't feel uncomfortable. I'm very happy. I really want to talk about it. I'm sure a lot of other people are the same way. They want to talk about it a lot. Don't be afraid. Just walk up and say it. Like, breaking the ice is the hardest part. Once you're there, you just engage with us, and I really encourage people to do that. My website is mindaid.ca, and I've got a list there of my best mental health tips. It's one page I really steer people towards. I also bicycled across Canada again in 2023. I'm the first person with schizophrenia to bicycle across Canada. I'm very happy about that. It was a pleasure to do the trip again. And there's a movie made about the ride. And yeah, and donate to people with mental illness in developing countries. These groups, these charities use models of basic mental health care that are low cost, proven effective, and scalable. Bill Clinton, Ashley Judd, Alison Janney, Robin Williams, Zach Williams, and others help promote these charities. Some people are actually kept in chains with mental illness in some countries. They're tied to a tree, tied to a bed. Some have their feet through a big log so they can't move with untreated mental illness as well. So there's a hashtag Break the Chains platform where you can sign your name and make a pledge to help unchain people. There's lots of things you can do. Donations, you can donate sometimes as little as $3 a month to these charities. So please go check them out. Find Mind works in Uganda. Strong Minds works in Africa, and they are having phenomenal results. They just need more eyes on them, more awareness, more people. If you can't donate, please share. They're on social media, share their posts, get more people talking about it. It's not hard to start a conversation about mental health in developing countries these days. We can talk about mental health in public now. In 2020, with the pandemic, it finally came out into the open. Mental health is everywhere now. 15 years ago, I couldn't talk about mental health in the grocery store. So if there's ever a time that mental health in developing countries could take off, it's now. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks. Hope this helps some of your listeners.
Absolutely.